I'll start by saying that I love the special. Like, it's great. Like,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, and so obviously, I was curious just for you, like, just to go all the way back. Like, when did it start? Like, when did you start working on this show?
I have been thinking about the show for like 5 years. And for a couple of years, I kept pitching it to like theater incubators and like grant contests where they would have a proposal like send in what you think the show is going to be. And I was like, this title and concept is so great. I'm sure someone's going to give me money to do it. And I was rejected from all of these things that I applied to for like 3 or 4 years. And then a friend of mine said, hey, I think you should do a solo show at Edinburgh Fringe this year. This was like January of 2023 or maybe December of 2022. So I had these ideas sort of percolating for like 5 years. And then I started working for August of 2023. So really started in January of that year doing readings and sort of showing it to friends of mine and getting feedback from them. So essentially from January through August is when I really like put it on paper and got it up on its feet.
It is crazy because it is, I think you're absolutely right, that it's a concept that sells itself. Like, you hear the title, you know what you're getting, and it's great. Like, that's, yeah, I immediately heard it and was like, yes, I need to see this. Like, this sounds amazing.
Yeah, and Edinburgh Fringe was pretty easy for me to flyer people and to market it, and people were attracted to the poster and the concept. But I guess, but there have been, I mean, I've had doubters along the way, almost the entire way. My friend who actually got me to do the solo show was going to produce the show and then backed out of the show.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know. There is a thing I've had a lot in my life that people sort of think I have good ideas, but I end up having to almost fully flesh out the idea, almost have to like have it as a filmed special coming out on Dropout. And then people say, oh yeah, you know what, I thought that was a good idea all along.
Well, I'm curious with this because, yeah, it's like I said, the title sells it, you know what it's getting. But I'm curious because I would imagine, like, that gets you the start of the show, that gets people there. But then it's like, what do you do with this? So how did you were you very clear on like the show that we saw on Dropout? Like, is that, was that pretty early on, or was that like a lot of iterations before you got to?
That was some number of iterations. That show really did change and evolve all the way through Edinburgh 2023. Actually, all the way through the filming, which is February 2024 for the Dropout version. When I did it at the various read-throughs and works in progress that I did on the way to Scotland, I was changing up the show based on each venue. So a lot of the like specific jokes about where the show sort of reannounces itself were all written specifically for each venue, which is why it's sort of naturally for Dropout, I just treated the Dropout viewer as another venue. So, because one of the things I told Sam early on, Sam Reich, was that I didn't want to just film a live performance and sort of hand that over to the Dropout viewer as, hey, sometimes I feel like when I watch stand-up specials, I feel that I'm watching an audience watch it. I feel a little bit removed from it. So I wanted to create something that was specifically for you at home. And like the vast majority of Dropout viewers are probably a lot of people are watching it on a laptop or even on a phone in their own house. And so I wanted the experience of the special to be for that person. I can't remember if it's in the special, but I specifically told the live audience at the Elysian when we shot the film, this filming is not for you. You guys are here to help us create the special, but there are going to be some things in tonight's live show that may not make sense to you, and you're just going to have to be okay with that.
Well, yeah, because if people haven't seen it, I mean, there's a part at the end, and I definitely want to get more into like the actual structure of the show, but like towards the end, the show like kind of eats itself, where you've like recorded these intros, and then the version of you that recorded the intros talks to the version of you on stage, which is great on Dropout. But yeah, I would imagine if you were there in the live audience, it was kind of odd to film those parts.
When I do it live, there's a slightly different version of it where I do still talk to myself. It's interesting. They're just trade-offs when you film something. There are theatrical things I can do when it's a live show that let me overlay live performance with audio cues in a way that just wouldn't work on Dropout. So part of it also was because the ending that in the live stage version, it doesn't end quite the same way. It's a very similar feel, but there's a juxtaposition that happens in the live version that is just not quite achievable in a filmed context. I don't know how to explain it. You can come see me next year. I'm still touring the live show. But it took this examination of like different mediums have pros and cons in terms of what they could do. I mean, the pro of this version was that we could visualize a whole bunch of surreal elements that we can only suggest if you're in a live theater. So we got to be very literal with some of the more crazy things that happen in the show. And I specifically, in the context of this, you watching this film special, you kind of have to be a Dropout subscriber to see it. Right. So either that or you're at someone's friend's house. Like there's almost no way just a random person could encounter this special without signing up for Dropout. So I wanted to have something that kind of rewarded you for that, like the position that you're approaching it from.
No, it is fun because, as someone who subscribes to Dropout and has watched other stuff, like if you know the other shows on there, I mean, one of the exciting things, I don't want to give too much away about the show, but I got very excited to see Paul F. Tompkins show up in your special and sort of do an impression of you at one point.
I'm always excited when Paul F. Tompkins shows up.
Yeah.
I was very inspired. My friend Jessica Gao created She-Hulk for Disney Plus. Mm-hmm. And She-Hulk is a crazy series that has a couple of moments in it that I was sort of thinking, maybe I'll try something like that in this. So I just want to give a shout out to Jessica for that. But yes, of course, anytime PFT shows up, I'm excited. Paul F. Tompkins, by the way, is someone that I idolize as someone coming up in comedy. And I can sort of publicly, confidently say he's a friend of mine now, which is an insane, surreal statement to make. And just having gotten to work with him so many times over the years, because I did a bunch of Spontanea Nations, his improv podcast.
That was a great show.
It is one of those things where I think a lot of Dropout people, fans, have a similar relationship to the content that I did to the people that I idolize, like Mr. Show and all these things, where you sort of come to LA and you're like, maybe one day I'll work with these people. And part of you just is thinking that's never going to happen. These people are on a different plane. And so when you do start to cross paths with these people, it's very, that all feels surreal to me. The people that I really consider comedy heroes that are people that I work with now. It's amazing.
It's also funny. I've seen a show at the Elysian that Paul F. Tompkins was an audience member in, and you can hear his laugh. He has a very distinct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paul is a great, great laugher. One of the best laughers in the biz, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. It's his. It's very distinct.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I didn't think about there are some similarities between the end of your show and the end of She-Hulk. So that's I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There are tons of influences that came up afterwards that I was thinking that bubbled up to me after it was filmed, because through a lot of 2021 and 2022, I played a lot of the video game Undertale and a lot of the video game Stanley Parable. And also I love the show The Rehearsal that Nathan Fielder did on HBO. And, it's funny because I feel like a lot of people have commented that they consider my special to be similar to Bo Burnham's Inside, which I love that special. I think it's great. And I actually don't see it at all.
No,
I don't really see it, but there's I think if you said it was inspired or ripped off The Rehearsal, I'd be like, yeah, I can see that.
I think there is.
Or Stanley Parable particularly.
Yeah, no, The Rehearsal is a good comp because, if people haven't seen the show, there is, it's Chris Grace as Scarlett Johansson, and then at some points the Scarlett Johansson starts playing Chris Grace, and then Chris Grace starts playing. So that's very The Rehearsal of the just iterations of iterations. Yeah. And a lot of callbacks.
It just occurred to me because there was a show I wanted to do a long time ago, because in theater school, we did mask work, which is sort of inspired by Italian commedia stuff. And I remember back then it's so funny. I literally didn't think about this until just now. In college, I wanted to do a clown show where I had someone put on a mask, one of those masks, and then put on another one, and then put on a third one, and have a character play other characters several layers deep, which is exactly what I'm doing in the show. I've never realized that I wanted to do that show like 25 years ago. And now I essentially have, because it is a series of masks. I mean, literally there is a mask in the show. But also it's a series of theatrical masks that are laid on top of each other. And I did want to sort of create the effect that, I would say actually this would be a similarity to Bo Burnham's work, is that when you remove the masks, you can never fully remove all of them in something that's being like filmed for consumption as entertainment.
Right. Yeah.
No matter how authentic I pretend to be on camera, there is never going to be a true authenticity to it. Which I just think is an interesting idea for me to play with, because I actually feel that in many contexts I can come across as being very authentic, even while knowing there's still like at least one more hidden layer behind that maybe my husband gets access to, but maybe nobody does, And I mean, I'd say it's true for everybody, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the old, like, you can never truly know someone else, like that. Yeah. There's always some level of performance to interacting with anyone else, even as if you're trying to be authentic, I think.
Yeah. And also, I think people talk a lot now about things being performative, and, if somebody helps me out, or are they just being performatively virtue signaling or whatever? And then I kind of think, maybe it doesn't matter. Like if someone is performative and they bring me food because I was hungry, I still am eating the food. Like, do I care if they're performative or not?
Well, yeah, if you need help, if someone's only helping you for show, does that really, like, who cares at some point? Why? I don't know if you've gotten this comp, but I think another interesting comparison for your work for this show, too, is at times it made me think about like Edgar Wright and like Simon Pegg, their like Shaun of the Dead stuff, in that you do a thing in the show that I really love, which is you tell some jokes early on that by the end of the show and through the different iterations, they become inside jokes for the people watching, where it's like you're doing these callbacks and then the callbacks are funnier, like, because it feels shared. Like we get what you're doing. Yeah. Which I think they always do.
I can totally see that.
Yeah.
I can totally see that in terms of like the sort of pattern based things that like Shaun of the Dead would have. Right.
Yeah. The repetition.
The second time you see him walk down the thing and he like slips in the shop and stuff like that. I wonder if some of this patternless cyclical stuff is definitely, I feel like a lot of us are eating and like drinking and breathing, like in terms of the oxygen of art, because I feel like there's Black Mirror stuff that like comes around this stuff. I wonder how many of it is influenced just by like the Improv Herald being a popular thing.
Oh, sure. Everyone learns to do callbacks.
Like we're just doing second and third beats to everything,
Yeah, for sure.
But also, I thought you were going to say, because something hugely influential from Shaun of the Dead is the scene with the mother, like 2/3 of the way through.
Yes.
Where there's a lot of goofy stuff. And then there's just like the saddest, most heartfelt scene right in the middle of it. And then the actors are not going for jokes. They're just providing this extremely true feeling moment in the, like, right before the climax of the film or whatever. That was one of the first movies I saw that did that combination of things. And I thought it was so effective. And a lot of my work has had that kind of stuff in it.
I do. Yeah, no, I am. Maybe that is why I thought about it, too, like kind of subconsciously, just tone wise. Yeah, because like I'm such a fan of that, too, that like where you can be silly and you can make ridiculous jokes, but then there's this like real emotion. And you definitely hit that in the show. And like at a time watching it, where I hope you understand what I mean, but I was almost like nervous for the show because it's like kind of spiraling,
Yeah.
And so like I was like so into it, but I was like, where are we going? Like, what's going to happen? And then that's when it hits the like true emotional like heart of the show.
Yeah, it's interesting. The amount of people that have told me like, I saw your special and it really made me cry. And I'm like, is that what I'm going for with this special? Yeah, that's interesting. I do think that I would probably be nervous too if I was watching a show that sort of went in that direction. I think I would be nervous to think, is this show about to get extremely cringy? I think that I still always have this sort of ironic reflex of, there's a moment that is truly, I would say, in performance as raw as I can make it, as genuinely emotionally raw as I can be. And the stuff I talk about with my family, my mom, is like, that's all genuine. And then there's a moment later where I try to undercut that.
Yeah.
Where specifically, like, I don't think this spoils too much. I really wanted to, it was not really feasible in terms of technical elements. I really wanted to have I think this only makes sense if you've seen it. I wanted to have a 100% genuine wig made of my actual hair. Like this. Imagine if this was a perfectly convincing wig. And then I wanted at the end to be able to pull this off and have completely dyed blonde hair underneath for the last beat of the show. I really wanted that, and it was just we actually tried several times to have like a professional wig person make something and it would just never. The volume of having hair and then it never read correctly. But that was a moment where I wanted to undercut that moment. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting how many people I've made cry with this. I will say that I think that's something about that moment I was talking about is genuinely authentic in the filming of the show. At the same time, I'm somewhat, because of the time and because I've done this show so many times and because I've been living with the ideas and the stuff that's in the writing, I personally am not as vulnerable to the stuff in this show as I think even some of the people watching it, because I've sort of lived with it for arguably my whole life. But you know what I mean? I've chewed up and digested a lot of these ideas for minimum 2 years now. So when people feel a little bit like the show is sort of getting a little, like some people almost feel like worried for me, like when they watch the show. And there is a part of me that's like, oh, I'm fine. Like, I've created this and I'm somewhat past it. And really, it is my job to pretend that I'm still as vulnerable to it. But you know what I mean? Like by exposing yourself to it over and over and over, after a while, it's like if you worked in like a Halloween scare house.
Right.
I think after a while, you're not going to be scared by the guy with the chainsaw.
Well, also, I would be concerned for you if you did this show over and over again and it felt the same that it did the first time. Like, I don't think it's a healthy... Time
I was on the edge of an existential crisis every time I performed it.
Yeah, I don't think that's sustainable. So I don't think... Yeah. Well, I do want to ask, since you mentioned it as well, like wigs, like you have a variety of wigs. What was wig? Was there a lot of wig testing? Was there a lot of wig figuring out?
The wig testing the first round of wig testing was me buying about 10 black and 10 blonde wigs from a combination of Amazon and AliExpress. Going on to like cheap websites to figure out what wigs I could get. And then as I encountered actual professionals, not me buying wigs off of Amazon, essentially most of the wigs were those wigs, but they were professionally maintained and styled by people much more skilled than me. So the fun thing is, if you ever come see me do it live, if you come see me at the end of like, say, a 4-night run, the 4th night, the wigs are in dire shape.
I would also imagine that's hot, right? Like it's hot under all those wigs. Yeah.
The wigs are quite warm. However, I have designed the costumes so that I'm nearly naked. So there's a lot of evaporation happening in the rest of my body.
Is the one that
you reason to watch the show?
The one that you kind of end up in, is that the Ghost in the Shell like costume that you wear? Like,
Ghost in the Shell.
Is that breezy? Is that one nice?
Yeah, that one's great.
Okay,
I can wear that all day.
Nice.
Yeah.
I feel like the leather.
I'm wearing the only part of that I wouldn't wear is that I am at the request of my husband, I'm wearing a dance belt.
Oh. Was that an early note?
He felt that it was a little too. I did it once without a dance belt, and he felt it was a little too clear what was going on.
That's a good note. I think that's good to know. But yeah, it's really fun. Like all of just the costume changes and the wig changes. There's one wig that has a chin strap, right? To it.
Yeah, I added that because there's an amount of stacking of wigs that goes on, and one, it was just practical, and I experimented with other ways to do it. I actually at one point was going to attempt to rig up a series of magnets that would keep them all attached to each other, but I actually just thought the chin strap was funnier. You know, I benefit from the fact that the wigs don't have to be convincing.
Yeah,
so it gives you a broader margin of error.
Yeah, that's part of I think the bit is how silly the stuff is as it builds on top of each other. Yeah. But yeah, like, so as you said, there were kind of different iterations and things like that. Like when you were doing it early on, what caused you to change it, or what kind of changes did you find as you went along? Like what was it that like you felt like changed over time?
Early on, my friend Ashley Ward gave me a note which really helped, which was that when the show was first on its feet, I was pretty critical of Scarlett Johansson from the top. So it was sort of this is a treatise on the things that she has done wrong. I'm going to walk you through them. And I think it was a little dull. I would say early on, there wasn't as much of me in the show. And so based on a note that Ashley gave me, we essentially flip-flopped the arc of it, where I start out as being a big fan of hers, and I'm like genuinely a fan of a lot of Scarlett Johansson's work. So it came from that point of view, and it's kind of funny. Like the more I insist that the show is not critical of her, the more people start to feel that it is critical of her. You know, and so that was just an interesting arc that then the show had. I think it gave it a better progression, and then the rest of the modifications were just. A lot of it is me doing the show and feeling in a chunk of the show, I don't enjoy doing this chunk of the show. I need to rewrite this.
Yeah.
I think the final form that it's filmed is like 98%. When I think of the next part of the show to do, I am excited to do it because I just think, oh, this Black Widow part's coming up. I really think that's funny. I love doing that part. The part about like the little breakdown part's going to happen. I love the part. There's a joke after the breakdown that I particularly love. I won't say the full thing, but it's basically like this. I've been lying to you the whole time because of blank, which is just a funny joke that I always look forward to doing. There's like 2% of the filmed version. People can find out that you determine for yourselves that there's like one little chunk that I still never solved, and it's in the film version, and it's a chunk. I won't say which part it is, but I get to it. I'm always just like, let me just kind of get through this half page of dialogue because I haven't cracked exactly the way I want to do it. I'm still touring the show, so maybe I'll figure it out. But that's essentially what it was. It was like doing it in Austin, doing it at the LA Hollywood Fringe Festival, where I had whole other sections of the show. I had a whole section where Scarlett tried to do improv that I enjoyed, but it was not reliable, much in the way most improv is. No, I don't know. There was a lack of consistency to it where I just didn't want to have chunks of the show that I would get to and feel, oh, I don't know how this is going to go tonight. It's really like a intuitive thing, like a muscle memory body thing where you are just excited to do a part of the show. And if you're not, you should delete it or rewrite it. That's what I think.
I love to, I don't know if this was always the case, but I love that you made the choice that we get a lot of your backstory from Scarlett Johansson playing you. Like, I think is an interesting choice.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, when I first started, there was very little of me in it. And then I realized that there weren't even that many flips back and forth when I first started it. But I realized that in the world of Scarlett, she probably would have heard about the show and felt empowered to do her own version of it. And then if she's playing me, that me would also be interested in doing this show. So that version would do a show. And I think this is part that's probably more subtle than I would say the majority of people have not talked about this with me, but the version of me that's doing Scarlett about halfway through the show is sort of apologizing for her.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
it's sort of like, letting her off the hook in several ways. And that's not me letting her off the hook. That's her playing me, letting herself off the hook.
No, that's the thing. Like I was actually tracking who we were like. I was like thinking about that as I was watching it, of like, this is the, like, several versions down of you. Like that's.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't assume that every version of Chris Grace of me that's in this show is saying things that I believe.
Oh yeah.
The deeper it goes, it's definitely like everything is getting muddled. And I mean, to be honest, one thing that resonates with me, and I think has resonated with people, is that when I think about race and casting and diversity, eventually I sort of do end up muddled. I think it's quite effective and maybe persuasive to be very disciplined and sure of yourself in terms of what you believe when it comes to these social issues. But I also think that if you're living in these social issues, sometimes it just gets very confusing how you're supposed to relate to them. And in a lot of ways, the complicated nature of this show represents that it is difficult for me to give you a one bullet statement on how we think we should deal with racism in show business. I feel it's so difficult to solve.
But I think that is something that you do really brilliantly by doing all the different versions, because I think at the beginning you start with like, well, this is pretty obvious. Like, I'm going to play Scarlett Johansson and I'm going to show you why this is bad. And I'm going to talk about like why her choices, and then it's like, as the show gets more and more, switching back and forth and gets complicated, then you start to talk about like some of the complications of like when you were casting something that you faced, or like the thing.
Yeah.
So it is like, or like again, I don't want to give too much of it away, but like a sort of like, while you've made these points, then there's this twist that comes about how you got some money that you really needed at a certain time, that also further complicates the narrative. So it's like,
yeah, because the nature of our relationship to like these opportunities ends up sort of complicates your ability to stake a position and hold it.
Right.
I also just think a lot of it's informed by, we can be very strident about the way we feel like casting should go. And then it's your buddy that gets cast in a movie about gay guys, and it's 5 straight white guys that got cast in this film. And you're like, okay, but one of them is your friend.
Right.
So you're happy for them that they got cast. Like if you come up through improv, it's more rare now, but it's not impossible that you go see a main stage improv show at a major theater and it's 6 cis straight white guys doing improv.
Yep.
And one thing I realized was, if you are personally connected to any one of those 6 guys, they actually see themselves, they don't necessarily see themselves as like diverse in any sort of categorical way, but they see themselves as diverse within the 6 guys, like within the 6 white guys. One of them is the goofball. One of them is the one who always does the smart game moves. One of them does great tag outs or whatever. Like the 6 of them don't see each other as the same. Right. So they, but then like when racial diversity gets involved, sometimes it'll be 5 white guys and a person of color,
right?
And then often in casting, that'll be it. Mm-hmm. There won't be a second person of color. There won't necessarily be more than one. Like, I think in Kids in the Hall, only Scott Thompson is gay.
Yeah.
And it's like, we actually need diversity. We need the diversity of having 2 Asian guys on a team to show that like we're not the same. Like, we also have the same diversity of experience and what we can bring to an improv show or a film or a TV show, or whatever, that those white guys do too, Like, I don't think anybody would say that Ryan Reynolds and Paul Giamatti are the same, So there is a Chinese Ryan Reynolds and a Chinese Paul, maybe I'm the Chinese Paul Giamatti. Me and Simu Liu are not going to bring the same energy to a project, right? But we might be, maybe only one of us will get cast, because probably Simu Liu. But you know what I mean? So anyway, it's just interesting. I think the personal connection to things tends to muddy up these issues, because as soon as you know one of these guys, you're like, it's great. I mean, I'm so happy for them. They're very talented. They should be in something. So they are no longer this sort of anonymous person that you don't lay this intimate personal knowledge about. And that it's very hard to then like legislate all of these thoughts about like what should and shouldn't happen in terms of casting once it gets applied to the real world. And so I think maybe part of my show is forgiving myself for some of that stuff. But also trying to hold myself accountable for that stuff as well.
Right. But I think that is, what's really cool about it is that like you are very honest and you kind of look at this from a lot of different ways. And I think you do you talk about the point that like, sure, in theory, the idea that anyone can play any part is something that all actors believe in is a good idea. But like, we're not there realistically now. Like, that's just not the world that we live in. And I think that is a good point to make, Yeah,
like I think about there's some movie coming out. I forget who's in it. It's two guys, two huge stars that are playing gay characters. And I can't remember who it is. And Daniel Craig's in a movie coming up where he's playing a gay guy. And it's like, I think that is the ideal we want. We ended like Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal. Like now that I think about it, most of these like major gay parts have been played by presumably straight guys. And I think the problematic part for me is that there doesn't necessarily seem to be the same access in the other direction.
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of times people are like, hey, I think anybody should play anybody. And what it means is that they want to be able to do like the Birdcage and Philadelphia and like all these things so that they have this wide array of roles available to them. But it's not necessarily opened up in the other direction.
Well, and then it becomes like kind of an insulting thing where that's a good way to also get nominated for an Oscar. Like if you do Brokeback Mountain or whatever, like then it's like, oh, this is such a brave choice that he's made,
Oh, I mean, by the way, like one of the most egregious examples is like Brendan Fraser playing a fat guy. And it's
my God. Yeah. That movie.
Do we think that like, can we also cast like a 500-pound guy as like, this isn't even that far-fetched. Can we cast a 500-pound guy as the Kingpin or the Penguin? That's not that crazy.
I keep like, I feel crazy when I see this stuff for the Penguin where I'm like, there are so many guys in New Jersey that were probably on The Sopranos who look exactly like Colin Farrell does under all of that makeup.
I think there were guys on the crew of that show that looked like that. So, it's whatever. It's like, we want to be able to say that Brendan Fraser can play the whale and Colin Farrell can play the Penguin. It's like, okay, but you never see, a guy that looks like what the Penguin looks like playing in like the Banshees of Inisherin, playing Colin Farrell's part. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and the amount of acting, I mean, it is a shame also. It's like, what are the lead acting opportunities for guys 400 pounds and larger in the film industry? I would say 0 in terms of lead roles in a film. And here comes one. And we're like, nah, we're gonna give it to a guy that I would argue going into that wasn't even like bankable as like some huge star.
No, it was a comeback film for him for sure. Yeah.
And then whatever, he did fine. That movie fucking sucks. I hate that movie so much.
I hate that movie.
I watched it just so I could legitimately say how much it sucked. Although maybe that's not the most fair way to come into a movie, but I had read the play as well. I don't mind being open. The whale fucking sucks. Whale sucks for anybody that's overweight.
Yeah.
It like has the most, I was like, before I was like, it's so hard to, be strident about these things. And then like, what's going to happen is my best friend will be like, I was the casting director for the whale. And be like, oh, it was great. It was great. It was really touching.
You know what? I'll say it. If you're going to get in trouble, I hate that movie. So I'm with you. Like 100%. I thought
I'll tell you what I do hate about that film is that that film is sort of built on the premise of what if we start this film with a character that is so repulsive that you can't possibly relate to him. And then by the end of the movie, you relate to him. And it's like, oh, at the beginning of the movie, you start with a human being that's overweight and he's so repulsive that I'm pretty sure there's a quote somewhere from the playwright saying that about that. Like he wanted to start with something that was like alienating. And it's like, you're beginning with a very condescending view of people that are fat.
Right. And it's how you feel about this person. And again, that's where
I just want to rant about the whale.
Yeah.
I want to rant about the fact that I think he ate a pizza with like mayonnaise on it or something.
Yeah, isn't there
as
like
somebody who is fat? Like, I've never done that.
No, and isn't that there's like a whole thing with the pizza guy, like where he's like hiding from the pizza guy or whatever too, right? Like it's
yes. Also, I think the pizza guy kind of hates him, even though he's like the best sort of tips in business that the pizza guy has.
Right. Yeah. No,
you can't be a pizza guy and not like fat people.
Right.
It's not compatible.
Well, that is where it's just like, yeah, I think like the added benefit, besides it being the right thing to do, the added benefit of like casting someone who weighs that weight is like they would actually make the character lived in and act in a way that's not like a cartoon, some guy's idea of how that guy acts, which I think
you would probably save money on creating a bodysuit that had fans inside of it so that he could stay. Also, by the way, if you're going to put him in the fucking bodysuit, then make him sweat and feel the heat of it.
Yeah.
Fat people don't have built-in internal fans.
Man.
But you know what, to speak of it, like I do think that I think that when Hollywood wants to dabble in telling the stories of these people, it does. This is something I talk about in the special, which is it's shocking how often they don't include any input from people that would have anything to say about it.
Right. Yeah. Which is just like, again, adds depth and authenticity to a role instead of your cartoon version of what a character is, like, because you don't live that life, so you're guessing what that guy is like.
I think one of the things I do like about doing solo performance is that in this show, no one can tell me that I am not coming from my own lived experience in creating this show, and that is it is a nice feeling. To many moments in this show, I pulled just from things that had happened to me, or I don't know. There's an interesting phenomenon where you just sort of like show people something about yourself in a very plain way. I mean, it's weird to argue that the show is plain, but a lot of the moments are sort of presented to you about here's something that happened to me, and to have that be accepted as, oh, I relate to that, or I find that interesting or funny or whatever is nice. I mean, I would argue that it is a vote for people bringing their lived experiences into art.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's always better if it comes from that sort of deeper, truthful place, I think.
Yeah. And not from copies of a copy where we're like working off of tropes that were built into some, maybe that did start from lived experience like 10 versions ago. But then in film and television, we end up with sort of tropes about the way gay people are, the way Asian people are, the way Black people are. And we can sort of, they almost become like symbols for, oh, yes, that is how life is. I mean, I would argue we have tropes for white people as well. Actually, here's a trope, the trope that white people don't season their food. I don't know if that's true or not. I also know lots of white chefs who are very passionate about seasoning their food.
Right.
I also know a lot of white people that do barbecue competitions. Pretty sure they have to season their food. And so to me, that's like, I mean, maybe from the comedian side, I'm just kind of like, this is kind of a hack joke at this point. But like, it doesn't become it becomes a trope. It becomes a symbol that's like, if I want to poke fun at white people, whether I'm white or not white, I can talk about how white people don't season their food.
Right.
And everybody sort of gives it that, like, those laughs that are kind of like, they're almost like in recognition of the trope more than like you genuinely think it's funny.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to never do in my work.
Yeah. Well, how has the reception been? I think that's something you kind of wrestle with at the end of the show, but like, how has it been doing it for 2 years? Like, do you think, I don't know, like, has it generated conversations? Do you think like it's made an impact?
I don't know if I guess we can see if it's made it. I hope it has. I have heard from many, many people that it resonated with them. I've heard from a lot of people that were like, I've heard from a lot of Chinese and Asian people that felt seen by it, which I'm very happy about. And I've heard from a lot of white people that feel confronted by it, but like in a good way. And I also have I read everything. Like I read all the Reddit comments, I read all the YouTube comments, I read all of the Twitter comments, and I read all of my Letterboxd reviews. To be honest, 99% of the criticisms I don't disagree with. You know, some of them are like, some people feel it gets too meta, that it gets too complicated, that it gets a little muddled. Like, I actually don't disagree with any of those. Sometimes I feel, man, if I could keep working on this for 10 years and film it in 10 years, it probably would address a lot of your concerns. But also, from my perspective as an artist, I'm sort of having to put a cap on a project and say, this is what it is. For a lot of people, it's going to work really well. Some of you, it's not going to work really well. And I actually don't find your criticisms of it that, like, I think they're totally relevant. A lot of them seem very personal to where the person's coming from.
Sure.
Yeah. There's only been like one or two where I just thought the criticisms were just so utterly stupid, where like one specifically where they thought that I was being too nice. Oh, no, too mean to the North Korean regime.
What?
They thought that when I was when I participated in a college humor thing, making fun of Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un, that I was being too mean to the communist regime of North Korea.
Wow.
I have to say, I'll just go on board saying that was a fucking stupid review. And that's been the one out of thousands. The rest of them are all great.
Could you
and
tell
of course,
where
all the positive ones are 100% real.
Could you tell where that came? Was that from North Korea? Do you think someone?
No, it was a letterboxed,
like local,
far left.
Wow.
Far left communist.
That's wow. Okay.
I just can't get on board with
No.
feeling. By the way, well, I was going to say that Kim Jong-un can probably take some criticism, but maybe he can't.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was saying maybe Kim Jong-un wrote it, like logged into Letterboxd.
Maybe so. I'm down for a Kim Jong-un biography movie at some point. I think I can play him.
Yeah. You have experience. You've done it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious too. I mean, this is like a bigger question, so feel free to interpret it however you want. But I think something that you wrestle with and you talk about at the end is just, I guess, optimism, like your future in the industry and just, like hanging on for that everything everywhere all at once kind of moment or something like that. And I'm just curious, it's been tough out there recently in Hollywood. How are you feeling these days?
I am personally feeling great because the special came out and it's been doing great.
That's good. Yeah.
I created another show at Edinburgh Fringe this year called Sardines, which I'm very happy with. And this last year or two has been very, going very well in terms of mostly the kinds of people I'm getting to work with. I'm getting to work a lot more with Dropout in general. Getting to work with Sam Reich a lot on things. Yeah, I feel sort of generally optimistic. Luckily, I had a job that sort of finished after the strikes that still had some work to do. So I finished that. And that's a Shonda Rhimes detective show that's coming out on Netflix. I don't know when, but it's weird. I mean, I feel optimistic in terms of I probably will wait the 37 years and see if I win an award.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I am also just naturally a cheerful, optimistic person. My sort of normal set point is that of feeling like I can probably make it through whatever bad things happen to me in the next 5 years, and that I can probably hang around. To me, the secret to show business is just to not quit. And I haven't quit yet. And, I think that's reflective of so many things in terms of everyone has different levels of how many resources they have that let them not quit.
Right.
Some people have to quit after one miss because they have 3 children and have to pay for them, and they have a family to support, or they have parents they have to support, or they don't have that much savings. A lot of things we talk about in terms of Nepo babies and privilege and all that all folds into this thing of if you just don't quit, eventually you will make it.
Right.
It just depends on your stamina and the amount of safety net that you have.
Yeah.
So right now I feel pretty good about some level of safety net. I try not to think about retirement. That's a good thing as well. It's just don't think about stuff like, what you're going to do when you're 87.
Yeah, well, and none of us know. None of us know what will happen when we're 87. So, well, I do. The last thing, just real quick, I did kind of want to mention, I am a Superstore fan. I love that show. Yeah. And Jerry is such a interesting character. So I just because he's almost like an anti-character in some ways.
Yes.
What's interesting about Jerry is how boring Jerry is, or how but I was curious how you saw him. I don't want to project too much.
No, I think that's right. I think they might have played into the, I bet if you go watch the first Jerry appearance in season 2, he's not, partially it's the character's changed by a coma.
Right. Yeah. There's
after the coma, they basically felt free to do whatever they wanted. Right.
Right.
He's actually much more gregarious in early appearances.
Yeah.
And also there's a little Easter egg where in the very first episode you ever see Jerry, he's a perfectly capable dancer. And then this next time you see him, he's at the wedding for Cheyenne and Bo, and he can't dance for some reason. So there's he's a little bit of a chameleon. But yeah, I think after the coma, he did become, I think they sort of fed into, I do really love playing things, underplaying things and playing things with a deadpan. I love sort of an emptiness to a character. And so I did they definitely leaned into how empty a person he is.
I think some of the hardest I laughed in that show is the scene with the snow cone maker, where you're just describing, you're asking Garrett if he wants a snow cone, and then it's well, if you're going to, I need to know now, and also we don't have any of the flavor packets, and
right,
just the escalation of how this is just nothing, But
yeah, I would say that entire episode is a deepening of the Jerry lore.
Yes.
Because I think that's when the Guy Fieri poster comes in.
Yes, and you like his confidence. Yeah.
I like his confidence.
Yeah.
I actually want to get that poster for my house.
It's a good poster. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But no, I really do enjoy that role. I like the wedding that you guys have as well. You know.
I love that wedding episode. Yeah. And also as a kid of TV growing up, it's so surreal that the episode that I'm in was the featured NBC Sweeps Month event.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Who Shot JR, and also the marriage of Sandra and Jerry, getting full on promotions the whole week. I on my Facebook, I'm getting ads with my picture and animated hearts and the love triangle between, Sandra, Carol, and Jerry. And it's very weird to be part of that. Also very cool.
Yeah. Also, the absurdity of the bet that, you get traded on a bet.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Jerry just rolls with it.
Yeah.
He honors the integrity of the bet.
Yeah. No, I love Jerry. Jerry's he's an enigma, in a good way, I think. Well, is there anything I did not ask you about that you want to mention, or?
I don't think so. Everyone go see it on dropout.tv. Chris Grace as Scarlett Johansson. And if you're not a Dropout subscriber, I think you can do a free trial and watch it as well.
I think it's also $6 or something. It's pretty cheap, Dropout.
Yeah.
So
honestly, I would say in the streaming world, Dropout's one of the best deals going.
No, I'm a fan. The Game Changer stuff is really fun. They got good stuff on there.
And also they're cool with password sharing. So do it with 3 buddies and each pay $2 a month.
Yeah, hit me up. I'll give you the password if anyone wants to watch it. Yeah.
Get the HoboTrashcan
yeah, for sure.
Password.
Well, cool. Thanks so much for doing this, man. No, I love the special.
Thanks
and
so much.
If you do it live in LA, I want to know, because I would love to see it live.
Oh yeah, I will say that I don't know when this comes out, but Sunday, November 24th at the Elysian Theater, I'm doing my new show, Chris Grace Sardines. That's 9 p.m. on November 24th. So if you want to come see that, also a one-person show. Also, some people have told me that they like it better than Scarlett Johansson.
Ooh, all right, that's exciting. I like that. All right,
yeah,
cool. Thanks.